Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale. And finally, we are less than 2 weeks away from football season. Actually, we're less than a week away from college football starting.
We got college football this week.
We do. Shane, it's so bad. Like, I mean, you remember when, I don't know if you remember when they did these like old kickoff classics where they would actually have two good teams play? Like, I mean, Nebraska and Northwestern, and were they playing Ireland or something like that? Nobody cares. Vanderbilt, Hawaii, nobody cares. Wyoming, Illinois, they couldn't have put two decent teams in there.
Well, sadly, all of the teams you mentioned are all better than Arizona last year. Well, except maybe Vanderbilt.
Well, that's not hard.
That's not hard. This, but not necessarily this year. But last year, it's like how many of those teams would Arizona have beaten? So,
okay.
Hypothetical question. You don't have to answer.
With that said, do you remember? I know you do, but if you're listening, do you remember Arizona and Hawaii in 2019? Sadly. It was the week 0 game, and we were all really excited. Like, oh wow, we're the first big game of the season. You know, Khalil Tate. We were talking Heisman. I was thinking,
and Khalil Tate pulled a Kevin Dyson, and was it Kevin Dyson who was 1 yard away against the Rams in the Super Bowl? Same thing. But I mean,
Arizona should have never been in the game. I mean, they were getting blown out in the second half. He let them back. I mean, that was nice. So Arizona lost that game, won 4 in a row, and then lost 20 in a row after that, which is kind of an unbelievable. Wasn't it?
And the only reason that streak still isn't going is because of the COVID rules in Berkeley. That's it. The only reason it's not still going.
So you're saying if that game, if Cal was not missing 20 players, Arizona would still be winless.
I think that's fair to say, considering how close it was with all those players missing. Yeah, I mean, without their starting quarterback and their several O linemen and a bunch of other starters. Yeah, that was kind of a big deal, don't you think?
I try to minimize it. I try to say that the only reason that Arizona won that game is because I wasn't there.
That's true.
Because I was dealing with my own bout of COVID at the time.
That's right. That's right. You were sequestered. You were quarantined as well.
I was at the end of my COVID, but I was like, all right, it passed the 10-day window, but I'm going to stay home. Oh, Arizona probably is not going to win this game anyways. And I was watching at a sports bar, and what do you know? I mean, it happens that way. All right.
So you're going to 8 games this year.
I am, including San Diego State. Still waiting on my tickets, but as soon as those come through,
I'm sure the University of Arizona will come through with flying colors and make sure you attend that game.
I have called the ticket office twice and been told that I'm okay, so we'll find out this week. But yes, I'm hoping to be at 8 of the 12 games this year, so very excited, if not more. So excited about that. Also excited about our guest on this show, Shane, our buddy JohnWallStreet, aka Corey Leff, aka Howie Longshort on Twitter. He has 3 names, as you like to say.
Just like my guy Saul Goodman on Better Call Saul. He's got 3 different names. I got to mention that series finale.
You're big on that. Yes, I love
that show. Love that whole universe. But no, Corey's great. Has a wealth of information, and I'm sure he's going to give us some more good stuff here shortly.
Yeah, we're going to talk about conference realignment. We're going to talk about TV networks. We're going to talk about some inside info, maybe that he's gotten from his Arizona sources about this year's football team. So a lot going on with our buddy Corey Leff coming up later in the show. But first, it is time for Buy or Sell, presented by Ice Shaker. And Shane, you have your Ice Shaker right there, your Wildcat Country Ice Shaker. You can get one as well if you don't have one by now. Go to iceshaker.com, use promo code Wildcat Country, capital W, capital C, and you can get your real life Wildcat Ice Shaker, just like Shane's and mine, with $5 off. Okay, number 1 in Buy or Sell. It's a good move for the Big Ten to raid 4 more schools from the Pac-12, as has been rumored, Oregon, Washington, Cal, and Stanford, so that they can take over that late night ESPN window that I dread. Good move or bad move, buy or sell?
It's all about the TV money. You got to buy it. I think we're all heading toward mega conferences anyway, and the Big Ten is on the verge of becoming one already. This would give them 20, 22 total teams. We're probably looking at 3 mega conferences sooner rather than later at some point. So, I think if they have to bring along Cal and Stanford, Stanford was more attractive a few years ago. I think Cal, I don't think is attractive much at all. But if that has to be part of the deal, they have to piggyback on Oregon, Washington coming over, then you're asking from the Big Ten's perspective. It's all about the TV money. And if this is what it takes to close that deal with ESPN, then so be it.
The only reason Cal's involved here, Shane, there's actually two reasons. Number one, it's because of the San Francisco TV market, and number two, it's because of the idiots who are on the Cal Board of Regents, because they're trying to get, because UCLA abandoned them, so they're trying to get Cal in there. Cal stinks. Cal has a crappy football team and they have a crappy basketball team. The Big Ten does not want Cal under any circumstances. They may be forced to take them as not to have to deal with the repercussions from taking UCLA and not letting the Cal Board of Regents know beforehand. Stanford makes sense, great academic university. Therefore, so is Cal. But I mean, you have to buy this just because they'd be getting Oregon, Washington, and Stanford. But let's be honest. Can you imagine ESPN, the Big Ten doing this, and ESPN putting out a Cal Rutgers late night? I mean, there's no way that anybody's going to watch that. No
how
way.
Would Big Ten, how would you like to watch an 8:30 p.m. start over on the 11:30 in your case? But you know what? Hey, every conference needs bottom feeders, and Big Ten already has a couple. Rutgers, Indiana, whatever. Maybe Cal will join them.
Here's why I'm in favor of this. As long as if Arizona never has that ESPN 7:30, 8 o'clock, whatever window ever again, I'd be thrilled. Like, I know that it's still going to be there. FS1 has it a couple times this year.
And you have to have late night starts in Tucson in
September.
Tempe, in September. You just have to.
I mean, you don't have to. If you think back to, I think we were in school, or maybe a little bit afterwards, or a few times afterwards. There was 5 o'clock September games. USC Arizona was one of them. I think Mark Sanchez was playing quarterback. At ABC telecast. UCLA, the last time College Game Day was in Tucson. That was a 5 o'clock.
Was that a September game?
It was a September game. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because then things
September,
went downhill after that. Yeah.
I remember that. But I remember that.
But it was late September. Yeah. And so was the USC game. You can do it. I'm not buying this. 5 o'clock in late September, I'm fine with that. The Arizona games should start no later than 7 o'clock. These 8 o'clock starts on September 10th and 17th are like brutal. The death of all of us that have to drive further than from Tucson, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah. From the anywhere in the valley.
Yeah. It's a disaster.
Especially after a loss.
Oh, it's a disaster. Okay. Number 2, Shane, buy or sell. Arizona's quarterbacks will average 250 plus yards passing per game in 2022.
I think it's a good number, but I'm going to sell it. I'm going to take the under on that. I think that it could be close, and I think that Jaden DeLora will at some point maybe have a 300-yard passing game in there. Hopefully, because he's having a great game and not because Arizona's playing catch up and they have to throw the ball. But I think Arizona's going to be a run-first team, or at least a run-heavy team, a balanced team in that regard. I think that's more Jed Fish's style. Plus, they just have a wealth of tailbacks who can run the ball, and I think they're going to want to set the tone. So 250 maybe not be too far off, and I think Jaden DeLora will, like I said, will have at least one 300-yard game in there. But I'm going to take the under on that for now.
So last year, Jed Fish's for passing, Arizona averaged 226 yards a game. And that was with bad quarterback play, but they were getting their butts kicked often. So I'm going to take the under. And it's not because Jaden DeLora is obviously a downgrade because he's not. It's because I think Arizona is going to be closer. And I think they're going to be able to run the ball. I don't think there's going to be as many blowouts. DeLora's a good quarterback. He can definitely, throw for that. And maybe, if it gets to that point, maybe Jed opens up his offense and with Cowing and T-Mac and turns it into a passing offense. I'm going to take the under. I would say somewhere between 225 and 250 seems like the right number. In the 230s probably seems about right. But I think Arizona, the way Fish wants to go with it, wants to run the ball more often. And they have a stable of running backs. And so I'm going to take the under for that reason. So therefore I will sell.
Yeah. Well, and every potential starting quarterback for Arizona, DeLora, Fafita, McLeod, they can all run the ball themselves. So I think they're going to pick up some rushing yards, which may cancel out some of those passing yards. Plus, I think they're going to run a lot of plays, not just, hand the ball off the tailback, but some reverses and some trickery that's not going to be in the passing yard category. So for that reason, I think it's probably going to be a bit under 250.
I think it's going to be closer than it was last year, but yes, I'm going to take the under. Okay. Number 3, Shane, the highly touted freshman trio of T-Mac, Speedy Luke, and Kean Burnett will combine for double-digit touchdowns this season.
I think it's an easy one. I think it's an easy buy. I think
easy.
Easy. Yeah. Well,
Wow.
they're all true freshmen, but by necessity, they're all going to get significant playing time. That like I said, Arizona, I think, is in the middle of the pack now in terms of raw talent, but in experience, they're toward the bottom. They're going to have to start a lot of true freshmen. And these three, I mean, maybe these three would get significant time regardless because they're all going to be that good. But I can't imagine that there's not an average of 3.3 and a third touchdowns per player in there between T-Mac, Burnett, and Luke. I think Luke was going to reel off at least a couple of long touchdowns like we saw on Saturday in that scrimmage. It was a scrimmage, but still, you saw how fast he was compared to some of the guys around him. T-Mac, I think, is going to reel in a couple, at least a couple of highlight reel touchdowns. Keon Burnett's going to be a good red zone threat. Between the three of them, I have a hard time believing there's not at least 10 touchdowns in there.
Okay, so here I'm going to break this down based on my projected odds. I think T-Mac has about 5. Okay, that's what I'm going to say. And I know some of you will think more. He could easily have double digits on his own, but for now, I'm going to say 5. I think Keon Burnett's going to have 3. And I think Speedy Luke is the factor here. How much is he going to play? There's a lot of running backs in Arizona stable. I'm going to say he has 3 as well. And I'm going to put the over under at 10.5. So I'm saying 11, but I think it's going to be close, Shane, not easy, but close.
That's fair. And I do think that, with the wealth of tailbacks that Arizona has, and which is a good problem to have, like we talked about last week, I don't think Rayshon Luke's going to get a lot of red zone carries necessarily or goal line carries. It's going to go to someone else, most likely, probably Michael Wiley. But I think he's going to break off at least a couple of big runs. I think that's where he's going to get him, kind of in the same way that Trunk Canada did against ASU with those 3 long runs. There's got to be at least a couple scores in there. And then between Burnett and McMillan, I can't imagine there's less than 8 between the two of them. I just think that necessity that they're going to be more of a factor than that.
So when you brought up Trunk Canada just now, you talk about Speedy Luke as being that dynamic playmaker. Would you say, Canada was in the 90s, Clarence Farmer was a really good Arizona running back in the early 2000s, but it wasn't really a game breaker. The last running back that came to campus as a freshman that really preseason had Arizona fans' attention was Kadeem Carey. And I think what was that, 2011, something like that, 2012. Yeah. Would you say that Speedy Luke is the most hyped Arizona freshman running back since Kadeem Carey?
Possibly, well, probably since him. And there's some good, he's not the only great freshman running back in this class as well. But yeah, I think so. I think Carey got a little more attention because he stood out a little bit more. He was by far the best running back commit in that class, the best addition at that position. And they just didn't have as much depth back then. I think they didn't nearly as much. And Kadeem Carey was the bell cow almost right away. This freshman year, they had Keola Antolin and they split the carries. But after that, he was the guy. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen with any of Arizona's tailbacks this year because there's just so many talented guys who can do different things. Some are more dangerous from the goal line. Some are going to be big in getting them out in space. Some are better pass catchers. There's going to be a lot of mouths to feed, and some of them aren't going to get on the field as much as they want. But yeah, Speedy Luke is exciting, and you get him some space, get a little bit of space, and he's going to take off. And you never have enough guys like that who could just outrun their opponents.
Well, we had him on, I believe, after his U.S. Army All-American Bowl 2-touchdown performance. Yep. So if you're new to Wildcat Country, go back in the archive. Yep. And you can check out our interview with Speedy Luke. He's a good
fantastic plug. Yeah, that was a good interview.
So go check that out. It's from a while back. It's probably, 30, 40 episodes ago, something like that.
So go catch up on all the other ones while you're at it too.
Yeah, if you have a few, you have a day, nothing going on, just
what else do you have
Wildcat
to do?
Country. Yeah, 24 hours straight of Wildcat Country. Number 4, Shane, at least 2 or more teams in the conference will finish with worse records than the Wildcats this season by yourself.
If you're talking in conference play,
only.
Then I'm going to buy that. I think so. I think they're better than at least 2 teams in there. I think Arizona, looking at their schedule, non-conference is maybe a different story, but in conference, I think there are 3 wins in there, and 3 wins will probably be more than at least 2 teams get. So yeah, I think that they'll be better than at least 2 teams, maybe not more than 2 teams, but I think 2 teams is about right. So I'll buy that.
Okay, you're going to buy it. I'm going to buy it, but I'm going to circle 2 dates on the calendar. September 24th, October 1st. Arizona at Cal, Arizona home against Colorado. Those are the teams that I think will be worse than Arizona at the outset. the Wildcats have to win both those games. The other team that I would throw in there is ASU. Now, I know we talked to Canzano the other week that they got some, they brought in some nice transfers. Emory Jones, the former quarterback at Florida. But with the turmoil around that program, you just don't know how they're going to gel. The enthusiasm in Tucson versus the lack of enthusiasm in Tempe is a stark difference.
ASU to me is the biggest wild card in the conference. Arizona might not be predictable because we don't know how much better they're going to be this year compared to last year, even though they obviously are much better on paper. ASU, I think that the floor to ceiling is a wide range. I think anywhere from 2 to 3 wins to 7 to 8 wins based on some of the transfers they brought in. So it depends.
They're not winning 8 games, Shane.
It depends on how they gel. It also depends on if they can avoid the off-field distractions like Arizona's men's basketball team had to do a few years back. And we'll see how all that goes. They got a lot of new faces in the coaching staff as well, obviously, which is, except not including Herm Edwards, which is kind of surprising. But yeah, ASU, I could see the Arizona finishing ahead of them in the standings. I could also see ASU finishing 2nd or 3rd in the South. So
I am still standing by what I said, 6 months ago or more. Arizona's going to beat ASU the day after Thanksgiving.
We'll see if you're as confident the week going into that.
You're right. I don't want to guarantee it, but I feel really good about it. Okay. Bonus question. This comes from Zach on Twitter. It's a great question. It's not a buy or sell, but I felt compelled to ask it here.
And it's a great question, by the way, not just because he's my nephew.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a great question.
It was a great question. All right. Zach said, so if you had $1,000 to wager on one of these two outcomes, either Arizona winning one game and going 1-11 once again, or Arizona going to a bowl game, where are you putting your $1,000? Now, with that said, if I were an odds maker, I'd put the odds of both at about 5-1. Seems about right. Yeah. So how are you, where are you putting your $1,000 down? 1-11 or bowl game?
Well, what does Vegas have the over under at 2.5 wins?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So they actually have it closer to the 1 than the 6, which is interesting.
Correct.
But I see it's a good question, not because of the nepotism thing, but because I really think it is, because I had to think about it. I think, what's going against Arizona, obviously the schedule, lack of experience. I think the offensive line is still a liability, unfortunately. But on the plus side, they're just so much more talented. Like it's ridiculous how much more talented they are.
Correct.
Going into the season. So I think they're closer to a bowl appearance than they are to one win. It's not a slam dunk either way. But if I had to, I'm not a gambling man like you, Eric, and I'm thankful for that because I'd lose a lot of money if I was. But I would, if I had to go with 6 or 1, I would go with 6.
I'm actually going to take the opposite here. I would say if you said bet $1,000 on one of these two outcomes, I'd put 1-11, and let me explain why. Arizona has 3 non-conference games they could lose. Yeah. They're going to be underdogs in at least 2 of them, and probably against North Dakota State if and when there's a line there. So you could hypothesize 0-3. Then they have a stretch from mid-October through mid-November where they could lose, or they should lose 5 in a row. So there's 0-8 right there. I mean, let's say they don't win at Cal. Colorado at home should be a win. And then Washington State, you don't know what they're going to be like with a new quarterback. And then ASU in the last game, even though I like it. Yeah. I mean, as much as I want to say Arizona can make a bowl game, which I think they could, I just don't think it's likely. I think 1-11 is more likely.
Usually we're on the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of optimism versus pessimism, or as I like to call it, realism. But yes. But that's interesting. And you know what? It shows that it was a good question because you and I disagree on it.
Right. But we disagree in that you thought I would take, or I mean, people listening would think, oh yeah, Eric's going to be the homer and take the bowl, and Shane's going to take the one. No, this was not scripted. I had no idea what.
I don't like either bet. But if you're again forcing me to bet, but if I had $1,000 of Eric Cohen's money to spend, I'd spend $1,000 of Eric Cohen's money on 6 wins instead of 1.
If Eric Cohen had $1,000 of his own money, he's not making a bet on either one of them.
Fair enough.
Next week, we're going to do a kind of a Pac-12 preview. And the week after that, we'll do, week 1 picks and go over our national championship contenders, stuff like that. So we'll get more into what we think about the Pac-12 and how many wins will Arizona have. We'll kind of dive into that. We're planning to get back on a regular schedule this week. So this podcast comes out on Monday. We're hoping to put out another one Wednesday or Thursday, somewhere in that ballpark. And then we get back to the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday kind of weekly So you guys will
summer
get your
summer break's over.
Yeah, summer break is over, and Shane and I won't be traveling as much for work, so our real jobs. So we'll get back on a normal schedule. With that said, coming up next, kind of a regular guest that we've had lately. It's our buddy Corey Leff, aka JohnWallStreet, aka Howie Longshort, here on Wildcat Country. Scooby, we sent you an ice shaker. They are a sponsor, courtesy of our buddy Chris Gronkowski. You have it right there.
I love my ice shaker. Fun fact: when I trained with Glenn Gronkowski, everybody, when we were trained together, people thought I was the other Gronk brother. So it's kind of funny. But yes, I love my ice shaker. It is very good. I use it every day. I am a veteran to the ice shaker game, by the way.
What's up, Wildcat Country? Chris Gronkowski here. Use coupon code Wildcat Country at iceshaker.com.
Shane, it's always good to welcome back our friend and the guy that just pretty much knows everything about anything in sports business. That's our buddy Corey Leff, aka JohnWallStreet. You can check him out on the Sportico platform, and he's a wonderful follow on Twitter at Howie Longshort. Corey, always glad to have you on once again. Since we last spoke with you, actually this week it came out that the Big Ten is looking to expand further, or so goes the rumor. How much do you buy into the fact that Oregon, Washington, Cal, and Stanford are large targets for the Big Ten in very short order, let's say?
No, to be honest, because most of the stuff I hear comes from the Pac-12 side. With that said, I think that all four of them would jump at the first opportunity. I don't blame them for that. If Arizona was offered to be one, to leave, we would jump at the opportunity too. So I think everybody is open to the idea of a Big Ten, offer, if you will. I think the focus at this point for everybody is understanding that may not come imminently. And so what's the next best option? And I think there is at least a feeling that the next best option is banding together with the existing group, the remaining group, for the next 5 or 6 years, not a 10-year deal, not a long-term deal, but enough to buy the conference some time and figure out what the next step is. And likely that step at that point becomes either some sort of I don't even want to speculate, but I think at that point it becomes like, how do we tie up with either the Big 12 or the ACC to create that third power conference, or third, super conference, if you will. But I think everybody is just waiting to see how the landscape plays out. And so, sure, if the Big Ten offered any of those guys, they would move immediately. If they offered us, we would go with them. But assuming that doesn't come, I think, the idea is let's try to get enough money from ESPN, or I think it'll be ESPN, but from a broadcaster or broadcasters, that we can not fall too far behind and still be positioned for what becomes that next great shift. Because remember, last time we spoke, there's going to be another round of realignment. This is not the final realignment round. So it's figuring out okay, let's how to position ourselves for that next round.
Yeah, Corey, you responded to a report a few days ago that Arizona and Arizona State may be kingpins in what happens with the Big 12 and the Pac-12. You said, nah, Arizona's not a kingpin. The only way that they're going to move to the Big 12 is if one of the North schools leaves the Pac-12 first. Can you just go into that in a little more detail, if you would?
Sure. Yeah, I think I was surprised to see somebody suggest, I forgot who suggested it, but I was surprised to see somebody suggest Arizona and Arizona State would be the kingpins to make it fall because of what you were just saying. Most of the speculation has been around the North schools. It really hasn't been around Arizona. Where's Arizona going? The Big 12, I told you, for a long time has been a fallback option for Arizona. So Arizona is there. I continue to say this, but Arizona would prefer to keep the conference together. Let's get a TV deal that keeps us competitive with the other conferences. Let's buy some time, figure out what the TV landscape looks like, and worry about the next round later. But right now, I think there is no way Arizona is leaving for the Big 12 with those four schools sitting in the Pac-12. I mean, just none. It's a non-starter. And Now, don't get me wrong. If one of those schools were to leave, I think the conference is done. And at that point, everybody is scattering to the best opportunity. The first call for the Pac-12 will be to the SEC. I don't think they're interested. The second call will be to the Big Ten. They're probably not interested at this point. Again, we're not talking about the next round of realignment. We're talking about imminently. And so at that point, I think the third call becomes to the Big 12, and that's, like I said, there's a safe landing spot for us there.
Corey, if the Pac-12, Pac-10, I'm just going to call them the Pac, if they stick together for the next several years, like you say, any chance that they might add some schools? Like you mentioned San Diego State a couple of days ago, you say they fit from a TV standpoint, but not really from an academic or athletic standpoint.
Yeah, so I don't think that's the first option, but let's start there. I think the first option, if we're going to expand at this point, is some of the Big 12 schools. I told you there is a Oklahoma State is clearly the 1A. But then you start looking at kind of a second tier of schools, like who else could be potentially value add, and you start to weigh things like the Texas schools, which is TCU, which is Baylor. There are undoubtedly questions there about cultural fit and the religious aspect of those schools. I don't know if those could be worked through, but I think the idea of Texas is the most attractive. I heard Kansas, surprisingly. I think, that Kansas would be in that first group of Big 12 schools that the Pac would look at. Now, beyond that, you have schools like San Diego State. San Diego State is interesting because San Diego State gives you the TV market, right? The Southern California TV market. And while it's not Los Angeles, it's still a big TV market. It also allows the Pac-12 and the Pac-12 schools to continue to tell recruits that we're going to play in Southern California. We're going to have regular games in Southern California. Now, I don't know that that's a huge, I think the first part is more important than the second part. The fact that there's a lot of TV households that and potential eyeballs in that market. I think the Pac-12 is committed to playing games in Southern California, in Los Angeles, whether or not USC and UCLA exist in the conference. And, so whether that is, neutral site games or whatever the case may be, maybe they're out of conference games. I think there is plans and intent to continue to control that Southern California market, or to at least have a presence in that Southern California market. From an Arizona standpoint, I don't know how critical it is that we play games there. I think that, for families for kids that come from Southern California, the drive to Tucson is still easy enough that, those families can still see their kids play. I don't know that it's necessarily critical that the Pac-12 plays games there, but I think that from a perception standpoint, they still want to have that market. Now, San Diego State makes sense from a market standpoint. It does not necessarily make sense from a competitive athletic standpoint, their commitment to athletics. And I know they just built a football stadium. That football stadium is 35,000 seats. So we're not talking about the same type of commitment that you get from the Pac-12 schools. Obviously, from an academic standpoint, it doesn't really hold up either. So there are questions about San Diego State. San Diego State, I think, would be interesting. I think San Diego State, if they come, is not going to receive a full share. The value that they bring is probably not net add, and thus to add them, it would require them to take less than a full share.
A full share, yeah.
I do think that they would, frankly, from where they are right now, it's still probably beneficial for them to make the jump from the Mountain West.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I'm looking forward to seeing their new stadium in a few weeks. Heading out there and checking it out. That'll be interesting. It's just hard to imagine a Pac-12, school in Southern California in a 35,000 seat stadium, but that's beside the point. What's your expected time frame on when things could happen next? That the next moves by these conferences should be made. What's your just guess?
I don't know the answer to that. I think that that you need a catalyst for it, right? Like, what's the catalyst for it? I don't think that like Notre Dame is imminent or anything like that, right?
No,
So there's
no.
there's nothing there. The CFP just announced that they just locked in sites through, I think, 25 and 26. So like 2027 is now like the earliest we could see an expanded CFP. So I'm not sure what the next, yeah, so I don't know what the next catalyst on the calendar is, to be
Right.
honest with you. But I don't think it's necessarily imminent. I think that we could, this could play out over the next couple of years.
Do you think that there is any issue with UCLA joining the Big Ten in that the California Board of Regents, which seems like an absolute debacle and a half, are there going to be any issues there? And part two of that question, is that why Cal is even being discussed right now to the Big Ten?
I didn't follow the meeting the other day, but I was kind of following along a line, and it seems like there's a strong disconnect between the way the region. I'm not sure. Somebody tweeted like, I'm not sure the regions have ever seen or watched football. There's certainly some questions about how knowledgeable they are on the subject, but just as it relates to the UCLA, I don't think there's anything that they could do other than kind of inflict some financial pain on UCLA. Like I think it's hard to imagine the Regents forcing them back to the Pac-12. There's questions though about whether the Pac-12 would welcome them with open arms. I mean, there is no doubt the trust has been broken with UCLA. There are definitely some hard feelings. It would be very hard to work through that stuff. Now, I think if push came to shove, they would welcome them back. But it isn't exactly like the Pac-12 is saying, come on back. We really would love to have you, and we'll forget everything that has happened to this point. I mean, the remaining schools certainly feel like USC and UCLA stabbed them in the back, and it's going to be hard to. I mean, it's hard to imagine those schools ever working together cooperatively again.
Corey, I don't know how much of a difference this makes, but we used to say maybe 5 or 6 years down the road, we may see, the Pac-10, Pac-12 maybe break up, go to the Big 12, maybe they'll add on, or maybe the other way around, the Pac-12 will add some schools. How will Arizona's on-field performance in terms of football, how could that impact or maybe even improve their position? Does that really matter? Like if Arizona becomes a bowl team the next couple of years, becomes maybe they were at the height of the Mike Stoops era, for example, could that benefit them at some down the road, or how's that all going to shake out?
Would, no question, right? Because ultimately that's what this is going to come down to, is like value in terms of football. And so yes, I happen to be a huge believer that the quality of the play on the field could impact our attractiveness to a future conference. It's great that we have basketball that continues to be a power, but ultimately football drives this conversation. And, I happen to see, I think FanDuel put it out today, on social. I mean, it wasn't anything big or anything, but they put together like a mock bracket, and they said, which of these teams would win a college football national, an 8-team college football national championship. And they had Rutgers as the 1 seed. Arizona was the 2 seed, but it also was like Kansas and UNLV and UConn and like a bunch of other really bad programs. Like we just don't want to be in that conversation. No. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think it could make a huge difference if Arizona were to win and I don't expect it to happen this year, but if Arizona was to be to win the South and to be playing in games like the Holiday Bowl or the game in San Antonio, I'm blanking on the name.
The Alamo Bowl.
Obviously be able to play in a Rose Bowl, I think that makes a huge difference in terms of being attractive, because we also have, we already have some of the things that go in our favor, right? Like the academics, like the basketball, like the Phoenix market, kind of there are certainly some tailwinds to Arizona that are attractive, but the but is always, but the team stinks. If the team, doesn't stink, then I think Arizona becomes a really attractive option.
Last question I got for you, Corey. And Eric brought this up last week, but I'll phrase it a slightly different way. Are Arizona and Arizona State a package deal as far as where they might end up, or is there any scenario in which they could end up in different conferences?
I think Arizona would like to stay with Arizona State. I'm not sure Arizona trusts Arizona State, right? And I think both schools would, if one were offered a Big Ten spot, for an example, would jump at it, and the other one would be left, kind of just floating there. But I think Arizona would prefer to stick with Arizona State. I don't think that there's I wouldn't call them a package deal, but I think there would be, at least on the Arizona side, some motivation to try to keep that relationship and that rivalry intact.
All right, 3 rapid fire questions for you real fast. Number 1, in 3 years, Arizona is in which conference?
I think that the Pac-10 ends up getting a decent TV deal. I don't think they're getting anywhere near with like the Big Ten was able to get last week, but I think they're going to end up getting a decent TV deal, enough to keep them together as a conference. I would be surprised if Arizona's not in the Pac-12 in 3 years.
Number 2, Arizona wins how many games in football this season?
I'd like to think we could get to 6. I don't know if that's realistic or not. I do know that there's a feeling within the athletic department that this is the best team we've put on the field in 5, 6, 7 years. So from a talent standpoint, whether that translates to wins, I really don't know. The schedule is tough at the beginning, and so this team could be way better and still not be a 500 team maybe. But I'd like to think that talent-wise, we're going to be in every game.
You would hope. Number 3, since you have the inside track at Arizona, earlier this week there were issues with Jaden DeLora and Jacob Cowing missing practice. Are there any issues going forward that you know of with either player?
No, I hear everything is fine. There was a lot of minor type stuff, right? Like nothing major to worry about is what I was told, and that seems to be the case. I think there's Cowing in particular is somebody that we need. He has been, from what I understand, by far and away the best wide receiver we have on the field. He's the guy that I think we need to play. And then that includes T-Mac, by the way. T-Mac, from what I understand, has looked, he stands out because he's so big, and he's made some amazing catches. We saw the one in the spring game, or in the scrimmage, a week or two ago. But he's not physically ready to play yet. That's not to mean he's not going to play. He's going to play, but he's the guy that, in high school, he was picking on, 5'9" corners, and that you're just not going to find a ton of those 5'9" corners in the Pac-12. And when guys are hitting him in the mouth, he's not necessarily, hitting them back in the mouth at this point. It's going to take, I think, a couple of weeks for him to figure it out. Cowing is going to be the number 1 wide receiver. Now, as it relates to DeLora, I think there's certainly a lot to like about DeLora. His ability to make plays outside of the pocket has been, I know, something that's been kind of impressive, and something that has been encouraging. I think there's less pressure on DeLora just because, frankly, Fafita's been good. I think that there's a belief that, and by the way, McLeod too is obviously still on the roster. So I think that there's just a feeling that we're at the quarterback position there's more security and depth at the quarterback position than there is at the wide receiver position. Dorian Singer, by the way, is another one who I've heard has had a good camp, and should be improved. And I thought he had a really good freshman year to begin with.
Well, you not only talk about sports business, but you also have the inside track to anything and everything U of A. So, Corey, as always, glad to have you on. And I'm sure at the rate we're going, we'll probably have you on again soon because there'll be more news.
Yeah, no, happy to always join you guys. Stoked about the football season coming up. I really hope we get through that San Diego State game. If I would hate to see a lot of the goodwill and excitement and momentum go out of kind of a lot of the air go out of the bubble in that first week. But I think, I think people in the set, understand, and then we get Mississippi State, which is obviously a tough game, but I think expectations are probably pretty realistic around that one. And then you get that third game, which I have a hard time understanding why we scheduled North Dakota State in the first place. It seems like you got to be a pretty big college football fan to understand that that's not going to be a rollover. And if you win that game, it becomes like, well, they're North Dakota State, but North Dakota State is good. And that's going to be a tough game. I think honestly, from a pressure standpoint, I feel like it helps that we're playing Mississippi State first. If we ran into San Diego State and then North Dakota State and you're 0-2, like that becomes a much tougher uphill battle against Mississippi State in week 3. I think the way it falls out actually probably works in our favor.
Well, now Shane and I don't even need to do a breakdown in a few weeks. We just got it right there. Thanks again, Corey. Always glad to have you on.
Always.
Always glad to have Corey Leff on. I don't need to rename him once again with all of his names. Actually, I do. JohnWallStreet on the Sportico platform at Howie Long Short on the Twitter. Shane, just your thoughts on what Corey had to say specifically about his thoughts on the team or what he heard about this year's football team. Pretty encouraging.
Yeah, and it's interesting to hear his thoughts on, mostly positive stuff. Interesting to hear his thoughts on Teteroa McMillan. I'm going to try to actually say his name.
Teteroa
McMillan, T-Mac. And that he might necessarily struggle his freshman year, but maybe not be a star quite as quickly as we thought. Jacob Cowing is going to be the number one. I certainly think he'll benefit from Cowing being on the other side of the field. He might not get every defense's best corner. But it's interesting, and he might get hit in the mouth a few times. Now he's going up against the big boys in college. He even said after the scrimmage on Saturday, something to the effect of, going up against Christian Roland Wallace. He's like, yeah, he's bigger, he's stronger, than the guys I faced in high school. So it'd be a good awakening for him. And in the meantime, he's got Cowing to hopefully take the pressure off of him and a lot of other targets. Dorian Singer, his buddy Keon Burnett. So he'll be one of many options. He won't have to be like the guy right away, which is, Cowing's commitment was big for that reason, among others. But I think again, like we talked about in the first segment, I would be shocked if he didn't have at least one highlight reel touchdown grab at some point.
He'll have
not more.
Yeah, he'll have multiple. With that said, you look at the Pac-12 historically for cornerbacks. There's not really a guy that's like a shutdown corner. I mean, Arizona's had a few: Darrell Lewis, Chris McAllister, Antoine Cason, all Jim Thorpe Award winners. I think McAllister was in '98. I mean, outside of that, there's not really a guy or multiple where you're like, wow, these guys, Arizona's not going to do anything against these corners. The Wildcats are going to be able to feast. If Jaden DeLora can, or Fafita, or whoever the quarterback is, can get these guys the ball, they're going to have opportunities to make some plays. So I'm excited to watch that. The other thing, Shane, that stood out to me, Arizona is not going to be the catalyst per Corey as far as the team that jumps first into a different conference. They're going to wait on the, Pac-12 North schools. Mm-hmm. Does that surprise you at all?
No, I don't think so. And I don't think Arizona's really in a position to be a catalyst. If men's basketball were king, maybe they would be, but it's not. It's football, and they've struggled. And like Corey said, if they start winning some football games, that'll actually help them down the road these next few years. No, I'm not surprised by it. I'm interested to see if Arizona and Arizona State stick together in the same conference. I think they will. But yeah, it sounds like based on what Corey's told us multiple times, what John Canzano's told us, is that Arizona is intent on sticking with the conference, at least as long as everyone else is. There's like, I'm in as long as you're in kind of attitude. That can change at any moment. But I'm okay with where they're at. And no pressure, Jed. Just win some games these next few years and give Arizona a chance to get a better TV deal and a better conference.
And I'm standing by what I've said for weeks. I want out of this lame duck Pac conference because I think that Oregon will jump. They will bring others with them. It's just inevitable that the Big Ten is going to expand as far as I'm concerned. And I'm just ready for Arizona to be done with this conference. It just lost its luster without the Southern California schools. Hate to say it, but it's true. Speaking of scheduling and such, in the past week since we did a show last, the Pac-12 announced their conference windows for basketball for men's basketball when Arizona specifically will play certain teams. So their first Pac-12 game will be on the road December 1st at Utah, and then December 4th is their first Pac-12 home game against Cal. Then they have a few more non-conference games before ASU between Christmas and New Year's. Is there anything that stood out to you, Shane, in looking at this schedule that was kind of abnormal or advantageous or disadvantageous, if that's even a word, for Arizona?
I believe it's a word. Yeah, no, not a lot. I did notice that they do play at ASU, I believe, between Christmas and New Year's, which is interesting. I know in the years past when they've played ASU in Tucson between the holidays, all the students are gone. And so you have other people filling up the student section. The question is in Tempe, will other fans fill up that student section like they did in McHale? And will they have the curtain of distraction? Because how is ASU going to beat Arizona without the curtain of distraction? So in all seriousness, taking the students out of it, I feel like it's kind of a shame to not have students there for the rivalry games. It just makes it more fun, I think. In Tempe, I'm not as upset about it, obviously.
Sure.
But it would have been nice to have them there. And then they close the season. Arizona closes the season against ASU at home, I believe.
Yeah, well, so one thing to note in looking at the schedule, for the windows, the window for the ASU, the first game on the road is the last possible day is January 2nd, which is a Monday. Mm-hmm. So there's a chance we all get that off of work. Could Arizona and Arizona State be playing another Monday game like they did earlier this season, even though it was a makeup game from COVID? Could that be another Monday game in Tempe? But as you're right, Shane, no students means no ridiculous curtain of BS.
And could it be more McHale North than usual?
Of course.
Will the usual amount of Arizona fans show up?
So
just an interesting dynamic possible there.
So ASU is senior day for Arizona at home at McHale Center, February 22nd through the 26th. What's interesting to me about this schedule is that the Wildcats' last regular season games will be against UCLA and at USC. So they're at those two schools. I don't really like it. I want the Wildcats to get some momentum going into the Pac-12 tournament, which would be the following week. UCLA looks to be the best team in the conference, probably Oregon number 2. Arizona and USC probably number 3 at that point. I would have liked to have seen an easier opponent, and maybe that be at home as we've seen in previous years. But that's my biggest complaint with the schedule.
I'm the other way around, actually. I kind of like the schedule gets tougher as we get closer to the NCAA tournament. I'd like Arizona to be more battle tested going into that tournament, assuming they make it, which I think they will, despite the fact they've lost so much talent. But yeah, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with them getting punched in the mouth, and hopefully they punch back.
Got to win one of those two games. Got to win one.
Yeah, but even if they don't, I think it's a learning experience. And then maybe you go into the Pac-12 tournament, you probably face at least one of those teams there, if not both of them, and you get a chance for payback in front of what essentially is a home crowd in Las Vegas for them. So I'm okay with them facing those teams toward the end of the season and getting ready for the tougher NCAA tournament play.
Well, for the next 7 months or more, we have football and basketball predictions to make in every show outside of this one. And just super excited. We've made it. We got through, the summer, which is always the tough part, but a lot of exciting things on the horizon. Obviously, football should be better. Basketball, men should be interesting. The women, really, really good. Adia's done a great job with that. Yep. Softball coming off a year in Oklahoma City where they made it to Oklahoma City in the Final 8. And, can the baseball team, make another run and maybe in Chip Hale's second year, do something similar to what they did in Jade Johnson's second year, which was make it pretty far in Omaha. So pretty exciting time coming up over the next 7, 8, 9, maybe even more months of live games. So we're here. We finally made it. So want to thank our friend Corey Leff, aka JohnWallStreet, aka Howie Longshort, for joining us as always. For Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Thanks for listening. And as I always like to say, bear down.